Gym leaders are some of the hottest trainers around.
Huh?
That's hot as in skillful, not attractive. Although I guess it depends on who you ask. You know, maybe I should just do normal intros from now on. I've decided to embark on a journey to craft the perfect gym leader for every type in the game. I've been going type by type to build a full team of 6 Pokemon with thought out movesets, abilities, items, and most importantly, an emphasis on representing that type as best as possible. Each type has certain traits that make it unique, and this series aims to both highlight those traits and utilize them to craft a high-level gym leader team. In the last video we covered the rock type, and today we're blazing on through to our 10th type, fire. Before we do, ground rules. This team will not include legendaries, mythicals, ultra beasts, or paradox Pokemon, as it's pretty unfair for a gym leader to have one of these. I'm also excluding all 4 generational gimmicks, so apologies to all of you Mega Camerupt fans out there. All 7 of you. And third, I'm not repeating Pokemon between teams, for both variety and continuity with my previous videos. As for what can be included, basically everything else. Pokemon can have any of their moves, including level up, TMs, egg moves, and even those removed in recent generations. Pokemon can also have any of their abilities and any held item. And don't worry, I avoided the urge to put heavy duty boots on most of the team. Finally, this series ultimately has 2 goals. Build a diverse and well-balanced monotype team, and build a team that represents its type as best as possible. With all that covered, let's talk about the fire type. Now that I'm halfway through the type chart, I want you to look at the ones we've covered and the ones we have left. It should be apparent that most of the types people consider the best are on the right side. You can maybe swap ones like electric and psychic, but as a whole, this halfway point is a solid divide between the upper and lower echelons of the type chart. Obviously, a big point of this series is showcasing that no type is truly bad, but I'd be lying if I said they were all created equal. The point is, fire is a great way to start this second half of the series. Before this, most of the types we've covered have something holding them back. Rock's numerous weaknesses, Ice's lack of resistances, Bug's terrible stat rankings, or even Ghost's... Okay, maybe not Ghost, that team was pretty cracked. Fire is a powerful type, that's really all I'm saying. Starting with stats, the biggest standout is second place in special attack. Talk about firepower. What's even crazier is that it sits above Psychic. I just wanted to sink in that a type centered on special mental prowess is outranked by... Outside special attack, the rest is pretty solid, with the only stat outside the top 50% being defense, which really isn't bad considering Steel and Rock's permanent residence at the top. One last thing with stats, when you rank the average base stat totals of every type, Fire sits at 4th place, which is the highest we've seen in this series thus far. For one, that's a testament to how good its special attack is, but it also tells us that the type overall can be considered one of the best. And I think a lot of people would agree, especially given its place in the type chart. Fire is super effective against Bug, Grass, Ice, and Steel, and not very effective against Dragon, itself, Rock, and Water. While it does have to manage a few resisted hits, including the game's most common type, hitting 4 for super effective is a great trade-off. In fact, from a type chart perspective, Fire is one of the best offensive types in the game. Which is kind of funny because by this logic, it's also one of the game's best defensive types as well, with a whopping 6 resistances, being Bug, Fairy, Fire, Grass, Ice, and Steel. The only type with more resistances is Steel, which explains why Heatran can be so frustrating despite having no reliable recovery. And while Fire does have 3 weaknesses in Ground, Rock, and Water, these 3 share a common weakness in Grass. And it just so happens that a lot of Fire types get access to this really cool move called Solar Beam, which means it's time to... Sun is a bit of a weird weather condition. While it directly helps Fire types by boosting the power of their moves and decreasing damage from water attacks, everything that pairs well with Sun is typically given the Grass types. Abilities like Chlorophyll, Harvest, Flower Gift, Leaf Guard, and moves such as Growth, Solar Blade, and Synthesis are all seen on Grass types. Even Solar Power, which buffs the user's special attack by 50%, is only on 2 Firemons, Charizard and Mega Houndoom. With the weather condition splitting its benefits between the 2 types, it came down to a question of, does the Grass type need Sun for the synergy and extra utility, or does the Fire type need Sun to emphasize offense and help mitigate a weakness? Obviously, we know what my answer was. Also, there's no Grass type with Drought to set the Sun automatically, so that should have made it obvious from the start. I don't want to beat the firepower joke to death, which I know is rare for me, but the term really is accurate in describing the type's specialty of... And having Sun active is the perfect way to amplify this. I complimented Fire's defensive utility earlier, but the type definitely skews towards offense. This is especially apparent when looking at Fire's move list, as it only has 3 status moves in the entire game. There's Sunny Day, which we've kind of been talking about this whole time, Will-O-Wisp, the only move that just inflicts the Fire-type status, and Burning Bulwark, which is a signature move to gouging fire that got added this generation. Aside from those, every fire move is an attacking move. So yeah, offense is the name of the game. And I think this idea would translate to the team's gym leader. I envision them as this fiery personality with a strong passion for battling and getting stronger. As you saw by the thumbnail, I think Flannery is a great comparison. I mean, her moniker in Emerald is Passion Burn Flannery, for Christ's sake. I don't think our fire gym leader would be quite as inexperienced as her, but they would definitely be ignited, maybe a bit hasty. If you watch anime, think of Ace from One Piece or Rengoku from Demon Slayer. And no, I didn't bring these two up because of the donut thing, although that was a happy accident, I'm not gonna lie. And if you don't watch anime, I don't know, go watch some anime. And also leave a like and subscribe. My dog and I would both appreciate it. To get this team started, let's pick a drought user to set the sun, of which we have 2 choices: the fox Pokemon Ninetales and the coal Pokemon Torkoal. Off the bat, I think both are solid options, just ones that fulfill slightly different roles. I'll show off movesets for both of them, but I ultimately think Torkoal is the better option. When you look at stats, Ninetales is more well-rounded, including a much better speed stat. However, Torkoal actually hits harder, which came as a big surprise to me. Obviously, this turtle is great for its defensive prowess, but solely based on which one has more firepower, Torkoal is the better pick. Then again, Ninetales can use Nasty Plot to boost its special attack. And if you pair that with moves like Fire Blast to deal a ton of damage in the sun, Solar Beam to hit those ground, rock, and water types, and Scorching Sands for additional coverage, you would have a solid offensive Sunsetter. It's an effective moveset, but it's not what this team needs out of a lead. Whether we're talking about Ninetales or Torkoal, in terms of offense, they're the weakest team member, by a pretty good margin. So why waste those precious sun turns trying to make it solo when you can set up your team for success by using Lava Plume to have a better chance of landing a burn, Rapid Spin to get rid of stealth rocks that could hurt your team, Solar Beam because it's still nice to hit ground, rock, and water types, and finally, Explosion to get off the field and make room for the team's true heavy hitters. Even if you don't like this exact moveset, Torkoal has a lot of other options like Body Press, Yawn, or even Stealth Rocks of its own. But I don't think there's any need to overcomplicate it, as its main goal is to simply set up the sun, maybe get rid of some Stealth Rocks, and then go boom. I don't want to seem dismissive of our lead Pokemon, but let's not act like either Torkoal or Ninetales would see a ton of use without Drought as their ability, which is why their held item would obviously be the Heat Rock to extend the sun turns. But instead of talking about our Sunsetter like they're disposable, let's celebrate them for their contribution to the cause. And then dispose of them. All jokes aside, it's important to save our sun turns for our next team member, the spicy pepper Pokemon, Scovillain. On paper, our first ever Fire Grass type might seem underwhelming to some. While it sports some impressive offensive stats, everything else is pretty middling. Not to mention, its moveset is quite sparse, with only a handful of non-stab attacking moves. It's not a bad Pokemon, but I think a lot of people would consider it a bit of a letdown, at least in a competitive sense. I mean hell, it's down in the ZU tier. I don't even know what that means. But luckily for us, this isn't a competitive team. It's a fire monotype team that's utilizing Sun, which is exactly what Scovillain was made for. I've already mentioned how great grass moves are offensively on this team, but now that we have a grass type, we have a team member that takes neutral damage from both ground and water moves. And we also have access to some of the utility grass types have in Sun, such as Chlorophyll, which doubles our speed. And with Scovillain sitting at base 75, this Seedy Pepper will have a Speedy Pep in its step. Say that 5 times fast. We can also make use of a Sun team's favorite setup move, Growth. It normally buffs attack and special attack by 1 stage, but under Sun this effect doubles. And along with Growth for setup, Scovillain can run Fire Blast for raw damage output, Solar Beam to nuke the threatening 3, and Stomping Tantrum for extra coverage. It might be a good call to replace Solar Beam with Energy Ball in case you're worried about the sun going away, or even replace Stomping Tantrum, but it's just like our fiery gym leader to go all in with the sun strategy, so it. As long as you have a Life Orb to make your attacks hit even harder, this Haughty Habanero will fulfill its role perfectly. In addition to Haughty Habanero, I also had Conflagrant Cayenne and the Carolina Creeper, but the last one just sounded like an expose of a Minecraft YouTuber. Now that we've covered the Peruvian Puff Pepper, when it comes to the sun, the rest of our team is simply taking advantage of the extra firepower, which our next team member might do a little too well, the luring Pokemon, Chandelure. Huh, and here I would have guessed it'd be the Chandelier Pokemon. As y'all might have guessed, the big thing Chandelure brings to the table is its incredible 145 special attack stat, which outside of our ban list is the highest of any fire type in the game. And you know, sometimes I include a long list of reasons as to why I put a Pokemon on a team, but yeah, sometimes it's just as simple as Pokemon go brrrr. And to help Chandelure fill that role, we'll be giving it the choice specs so it can hit even harder. From there, it's a pretty straightforward moveset. Fire Blast for Sun Boosted Decimation, Shadow Ball for Dual Stab, Energy Ball for the threatening 3, and finally, Psychic for some extra coverage. Despite having a variety of moves, Chandelure can't hit every Pokemon for neutral or super effective damage, so trading out Psychic for an extra fire move like Overheat, or even a support move and Trick to cripple a more defensive foe could work out well instead. As for an ability, Chandelure has 3 great options in Flash Fire, Flame Body, and Infiltrator. The first 2 are more fitting for the fire team, but Infiltrator can be very helpful against screens or subs, so there really isn't a wrong choice. Ultimately, I'd go with Flame Body, as I see it being more likely to come into play than the other 2. Like I said, Chandelure is a pretty simple team member, but a devastating one at that. It can potentially 2-shot a Manaphy with Fire Blast, and that's not even factoring in Sun. There were a few options for a Fire Ghost type, and while any of them would have done well, Chandelure's insane special attack stat perfectly fits the vibe this team is going for. That said, let's take a moment to honorably mention one of those other Fire Ghost types, Ceruledge. Aside from the literal edgelord design taking the fanbase by storm, Ceruledge proved itself from the get-go with a really solid stat spread for an offensive Mon, along with the ability Weak Armor to double its speed after taking a physical hit. Pair that with Swords Dance, and in a single turn you have a +2/+2 sweeper ready to tear holes in any team, with moves like Bitter Blade so it can heal itself, Poltergeist for dual stab, and Close Combat for a final strong coverage move. It also gets moves like Solar Blade, which is just physical Solar Beam, Destiny Bond to take an opponent down with it, and a whole bunch of other coverage moves like Iron Head, Poison Jab, Psycho Cut, and X-Scissor. It's a great Pokemon, but between Chandelure hitting as hard as it does and the other physical attacking options we have, I decided it was better as an honorable mention. There's also Alolan Marowak, which, but both myself and my friend Chip, who helps me with these videos, love it, so I needed to call it out by name at least once. Between this series and my recent video on your broken Pokemon ideas, it's clear that y'all like creating things in the Pokemon world, which is why I wanted to take a second to shout out my pal tyKenter and his project, Chat Makes a Pokemon Fan Game. As the name suggests, he's been live streaming the creation of a fan game called Pokemon Potassium, where chat decides everything that goes in the game. Fakemon, characters, music, sprites, it's all been built by the community, and it's all really impressive. Especially a lot of the sprites, as they're some of the coolest I've seen in a long time. I even got to make my own Pokemon, meet Rollover and Barktick, with shiny forms too. They're currently taking submissions for creating the 6th gym leader, which is clearly right up y'all's alley. Go and check out the Discord server after the video and submit your own gym leader. They'll be voting on the winner via stream in April, so be sure to sub to his channel too so you don't miss it. I've included links to everything down in the description. It's truly a passion-filled project, and it's one I highly recommend you look into if you're interested. After my video, of course. Speaking of which, our next team member has actually shown up a couple of times in this series, and that's the Plasma Pokemon, Rotom Heat. As you look at its stats, I want to stress that Rotom is what you make of it. A lot of people view it as a defensive Mon, like how I used Rotom Wash on the Electric team. But it can also be offensive with its 105 special attack, which was how the Grass team utilized Rotom Mow. As for what Rotom Heat does for this team, I think it lands somewhere in the middle. It obviously provides defensive utility as a levitating fire type, but it can also scare water types with Electric Stab or just throw out powerful overheats in the sun. Keep in mind that the Rotom appliances hit harder than most mythicals, so they can be threatening if you're not careful. To create this balance between offense and defense, we'll start by giving Rotom Heat its signature move, Overheat. The special attack drop is a bummer, but given all the other fire moves on this team, it's not super likely it'll get used. Unlike Volt Switch, which both gives us a move for water types and provides us with switch initiative. Third would be Will-O-Wisp. There's quite a few Pokemon that resist our dual stab, so being able to burn them to both whittle them down and have their attack stat is a big plus. As for the last move, we have a couple of options. Defog is great in case you chose Ninetales as a Sunsetter or if you forewent Rapid Spin on Torkoal. Pain Split can keep Rotom healthy and whittle down the opponent, and even an extra coverage move like Hex could prove quite useful, especially since you have Will-O-Wisp. But ultimately, I decided on giving it Sunny Day. Similar to how the Ice team had an extra user of Snowscape, Rotom Heat could provide a ton of utility by simply re-upping the Sun and pivoting out to one of our harder hitters. As for an item, I'd go with Heavy Duty Boots because of the whole pivoting aspect, although leftovers are fine too if you feel confident that Torkoal can clear away the Stealth Rocks. This is the last time a Rotom appliance is being used on one of these teams, but I think it was a great final showcase of what this mon does best. That said, if you don't think this team needs a bulky pivot like Rotom Heat, you could swap it for this honorable mention, Armarouge. As the specially offensive counterpart to Ceruledge, it should be obvious that Armarouge is a great team member for launching off powerful attacks, especially because of the long list of coverage moves it has at its disposal, as well as status moves like Calm Mind, Destiny Bond, or even Trick Room. You can even run one of my favorite sets, which is Meteor Beam plus a Power Herb, and you can pair that with its signature move Armor Cannon to dish out some crazy damage, Psychic for dual stab, and then either Energy Ball, Aura Sphere, or Scorching Sands for extra coverage. And since it also gets weak armor like Ceruledge to boost its speed, it can quickly get out of control. But ultimately, even if you swap out some of its moves or even its item, it basically fulfills the same role as Chandelure, only weaker and slower. I feel bad for relegating both Armarouge and Ceruledge to honorable mentions, as they're both fantastic additions to the Fire-type roster, but apparently I never finished that sentence in the script, so let's just leave it at but. Even though Fire is geared towards special attacking, it's important for this team to have some physical prowess for the sake of balance. So after careful consideration, and absolutely no dog bias, I promise, our next team member is the legendary Pokémon, Hisuian Arcanine. Even though this good boy sports a 4x weakness to both ground and water, I think our team is set up well enough to accommodate those drawbacks. And besides, the team isn't meant to take hits, but to dish them out, which is exactly what this strong physical attacker is meant to do. Now to be fair, you could say the same thing for regular Arcanine. Their stats are pretty similar, with the original being a touch faster and more offensively balanced, and they even have the same abilities in Flash Fire and Intimidate, both of which would be great for this team. But the deciding factor came in their hidden abilities, where the original gets Justified, raising your attack when hit by a Dark-type move, and Hisuian gets Rockhead, which prevents recoil damage. And with the offensive team that we're building, having a Pokemon that can use moves like Flare Blitz without losing a ton of health is fantastic. It would also have Head Smash, which is an even stronger stab recoil move, Close Combat for additional coverage, and either Wild Charge, which hits water types and gets us even more mileage out of Rockhead, or Extreme Speed for priority. The last move is a toss-up, but since the first three already hit everything for either neutral or super effective damage, I'd go with Extreme Speed to give this team some priority. As for an item, there's a pretty wide range of things to choose from. Pasho Berry can reduce damage from a super effective water move, Air Balloon can keep you safe from ground moves until it pops, Heavy Duty Boots speak for themselves, and with a Choice Band we could dish out some massive damage. Ultimately, I think either a Life Orb or Expert Belt would be the best way to provide a little extra oomph without keeping you locked into one move. But with that all said, if you're more inclined towards standard Arcanine, it can run plenty of moves like Morning Sun, Curse, and Teleport. Wait, a dog gets Teleport? What the fuck? Anyways, regular Arcanine is great too, but since we're wanting a powerful physical attacker, this Rockweiler is perfect for the team. Now for the topic a few of you have likely already commented about, starter Pokemon. Just like we did with the Grass type, I'm allowing one starter Pokemon on this team. As for which one, that was a difficult choice. Aside from Charizard, regular Typhlosion, and maybe Emboar, you could make a really good argument for any of them going on the team. Skeledirge would be incredible with its solid bulk and signature move Torch Song to boost its special attack, Delphox has some fantastic coverage and the ability to set up with Nasty Plot, and Incineroar, well, it's Incineroar. If you asked me on a different day, I might give you a different answer. But ultimately I chose a Pokemon that drives home the firepower point I've been making all video, and that's the Blaze Pokemon, Blaziken. Aside from Emboar, Blaziken hits the hardest of any fire starter in the entire game. And this offensive prowess is even scarier considering its hidden ability, Speed Boost. I think y'all can see where I'm going with this. Blaziken's role as our ace Pokemon is to go hyper offense mode and wipe the floor with the rest of the opponent's team. Simple as that. And to do that, we'll be giving it Swords Dance to boost its attack. Pair that with Blaze Kick, which is our strongest fire move that doesn't deal recoil damage, Close Combat to round out our dual stab, and either Earthquake or Stone Edge for additional coverage. Earthquake is more reliable, but nothing resists Blaziken if it has Stone Edge, so pick your poison. Fire. Move. You know, I'm gonna... As for an item, I'd go with Focus Sash, which is a big reason for choosing Blaze Kick over Flare Blitz. As long as rocks aren't on the field, Blaziken can reliably double its attack and get a speed boost before going down. It's truly a Hail Mary of a final Mon, which is why I think it fits our gym leader to a T. While it may be smarter to go with Skeledirge so you can heal with Slack Off and steadily boost your special attack, a true Fire-type trainer would go out with Hyper Offense in a blaze of glory. Wait, I could have said Blaziken of glory. More than any team I've built thus far, I think Fire has the best options for honorable mentions. You could swap out for things like Armarouge, Ceruledge, or most of the starters and you'd have a great team. So let me know what your perfect Fire-type team would be in the comments. I'm expecting a few to be all starters, and honestly I wouldn't blame you. Unless you put Charizard on the team. Anyways, thank you guys so much for watching. Be sure to check out my pal Tasty's project, Chat Makes a Pokemon Fan Game, with the links in the description, and as thanks for making it to the end of the video, here's a picture of my dog. Talk to y'all soon.